Clearly one of the best investments I've ever been involved in.
Just get the damn vaccine.
Welcome. The Truth About Vaccines presents Remedy, and this is episode 4. I'm Ty Bollinger, this is my lovely wife Charlene, and we are your hosts, and we're so thankful that you've tuned in.
We hope you've learned a lot from episode 3, and that you were able to absorb some of the many remedies available. But just in case you missed it, here's a brief recap.
If they really cared about our health, wouldn't they stop this glyphosate from being sprayed on our food? All of a sudden, they so desperately care about our health that they want to force us to get this shot that has side effects that they have no idea about. And it's just, you didn't need to be a genius to go, something stinks here.
And they've convinced enough of us to now rely on the fact that we don't have to do anything for our health to keep ourselves healthy. We don't have to worry about our diet. We don't have to exercise. We don't have to go outside and get sunlight. We don't have to take supplements. You can just get a shot from us. You'll never get sick.
When child go to the pediatrician at visits for 2, 4, and 6 months, it should be an educational event for parents, particularly a new parent. Instead, it's a vaccination day, and they can get 6 or 7 shots at the same time.
No one has really looked at the effects of receiving 8 or 9 vaccines, which is commonly done in the United States on at a single visit.
The CDC has access to the vaccine safety data link, and this links everyone's medical records. But they've never really data mined it, which would take, a couple IT people, probably a couple weeks to just plug in some algorithms. They've never done it for vax, unvax for total health outcomes. You know who has, though? Paul Thomas, Dr. Paul Thomas, pediatrician.
Well, it turns out from our data that was very significant, those who were unvaccinated were actually providing the greatest protection to the community because they don't get sick. Anyway, the study we published in the International Journal of Public Health was powerful. That was published in November of 2020, and 5 days after that publication was available online, I get a call from my attorney. The Oregon Medical Board has emergently suspended your license. I gave them the information they wanted, except they didn't want the information that they got.
They conducted a coordinated effort to de-license and de-practice Dr. Paul Thomas, who is truly one of the heroes of our movement.
The most deadly toxic thing that's ever happened to humanity is the introduction of the hepatitis B vaccine at birth.
Babies shouldn't be having sex and shouldn't be doing IV drugs. Therefore, this vaccine is asinine to be given to a newborn baby.
When you introduce that shot on the first day of life, you will never know what kind of epigenetic disease you set up according to susceptibility.
Merck's vaccine was tested for 5 days. They looked for the solicited adverse events. GlaxoSmithKline's was 4 days. So that's your safety window that you're dealing with.
In my opinion, any vaccine that has been tested for 5 days, I've heard cases where sometimes they're studied for 3 days, is absolutely unacceptable.
In 1999, because the CDC itself was worried that the vaccines may be causing autism, they decided to do a study, and they retained a Belgian researcher named Thomas Verstraeten. And he found an 11.35 relative risk. That means an 1,135% elevated risk of getting an autism diagnosis if you got that vaccine in the first 30 days. And they knew right then what it was causing the autism epidemic.
If you read the insert of the chickenpox vaccine, varicella, it tells you, it warns you, do not be around other people because you may shed this vaccine onto other people and give them chickenpox.
What is told to us by these pharmaceutical commercials is that if you had chickenpox, then the virus that causes shingles is still in your body. But what they don't tell you is if you've had the chickenpox vaccine, the same thing holds true.
So the shingle shot causes shingles. And so it was it's in our book Plague. It was one of the first things I saw.
There's so much sleight of hand in all this. So when these pharmaceutical companies want to get a product out in record time, they call it a vaccine. They can't have the vaccine if there's any medication, any workable thing that a person can use. It's by law. And so that's why they shot down hydrochloroquine and ivermectin.
They had to make sure that none of those things actually came to the light of day, or else they would lose their EAU.
They had to deny the effectiveness of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. They had to actively deny that in order to maintain that liability protection under the emergency use authorization.
Cause of death is almost always known. Almost always known. Now we see large numbers of reports of deaths, cause unknown. The cause of this new category of death is most likely to be the COVID-19 vaccines until proven otherwise.
As far as the died suddenly realities and the fact that all of these media outlets, as well as all of social media, have literally targeted and just shoved down the memory hole the millions of reports that have occurred is really, gotta have to say, criminal. It really is.
The way that these pharmaceutical companies are operating, they are murderers, is what they are. They are murderers. And what do you do to a murderer? You lock them up. You shut them down, you lock them up.
People were being threatened, people were having their licenses pulled, people were being canceled for using things like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and zinc and vitamin C and vitamin D and recommending those things to patients. But we know, there's a huge host of information on the efficacy of those things, and they're safe. They're not drugs that are going to hurt you or kill you like remdesivir might.
But what you can do instead is high-dose vitamin C, take out white sugar and white flour out of your diet, do things to increase your immune system, shut down inflammation with things like turmeric.
There are homeopathic remedies that I would highly utilize and recommend, like Bryonia alba, Nux vomica, and Chelidonium.
2 cups of Epsom salts, 2 cups of baking soda, and 2 cups of hydrogen peroxide. So we take proteolytic enzymes, we take herbal anti-inflammatories, and we take folic acid before going out into public.
We already have a tool in the natural world brought in safely in the bioactive hydrosol technology at very low concentration to prevent the need for a vaccine even if it were to work.
I had some friends whose kids have been damaged by childhood vaccines since I became aware of them. And I said, I've always said, do what you think's best, you do your own research, but now I feel bad that had I mentioned it, maybe my friends would have taken an extra look at it and they wouldn't be dealing with children that were harmed. So I don't know that I can stay quiet anymore with what I know, and whether anybody hears it or not, I'm not sure it matters, but I'm going to try to inform people what I know. They can do with it what they want.
Remedy is discernment, and the remedy is to have those who took the vaccine recognize their mistake and go out and warn others.
In this episode, we're going to cover the MMR vaccine as well as the component parts, measles, mumps, and rubella. And we're going to cover more fascinating yet disturbing information about the COVID-19 injections while providing you with potentially life-saving remedies and solutions to iatrogenic, in other words, medically induced health issues.
First up is the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine.
I got measles and mumps after I received the MMR, which in retrospect makes no sense unless the vaccine doesn't work. But my family didn't question the doctor. We just did what we were told.
As we've covered in the first few episodes, vaccinology has many of the characteristics of a cult or religion rather than a science.
It is absolutely preposterous. Anybody with a knowledge of the reticuloendothelial system or the circulatory system or the lymphatic system knows the interconnectedness of the human body and how it is such an intricate delivery system of different agents, of nutrition, of different nutrients. And so if you stick one antigen in one limb, it's going to go all over the body. They peddled that nonsense with the COVID-19 shot. Oh, the mRNA will stick in the upper arm. It will stick in the shoulder and it will circulate for about 2 weeks. Now, we're not stupid. The mRNA vaccine circulates all over the body. It hyperaccumulates in the ovaries. It hyperaccumulates in the testes. It does make its way to the brain, and it circulates for a minimum of 2 months post-vaccination. And so we've been lied to. We've been lied to over and over and over again.
They are intentionally misleading the public. So it's as bad as any tobacco science there ever was. They create bogus studies. They manipulate the data. They only publish and talk about studies that support their narrative. So that's a lot like a religion. They don't want the full science, right? I mean, science is never settled when it comes to anything that's changing. And we know our environment's constantly changing with more and more toxicity. Kids' bodies are being assaulted with so many more toxins as well as more vaccines. They're always adding vaccines to the schedule. Well, then you have to relook at the whole data. And they don't do that. So it does sort of play out more like a belief system in vaccines as opposed to really looking at science.
I think whenever somebody gets steeped in a certain agenda or philosophy and refuse to hear anything new or anything that might challenge their beliefs, then I think it can be labeled kind of like a cult, right? So if somebody is truly scientific, they're going to be open to new ways of thought or things that they haven't considered before and look at all the data and figure out, this works or this doesn't. Unfortunately, I think, there is a lot out there that is anecdotal, that's not peer-reviewed, but at the same time, instead of throwing all that out, I think many times we really need to look at even anecdotal evidence. If it's repetitive and repeated, maybe there's some truth to it, and we need to consider that.
That's a good point. Don't ever allow yourself to be so steeped in dogma that you aren't able to open your eyes to other possible truths. For instance, modern medicine tells us that vaccination is the same thing as immunization, but is this true?
Injection by infection, inoculation was never immunization. So every single shot doesn't give you lifelong immunity because you don't inject. So it's not an immunization strategy. Vaccination is not immunization. It's extermination or sterilization. So once we went to these shots and then removed all liability, the game was on in the cult of scientism. It never was science.
We know science is a method of discovery, right? And you're supposed to actually question the established body of science, but we saw, especially in the past few years, these memes and these statements by the CDC, etc. Trust the science, or why don't you believe in the science? They've literally created this oxymoronic configuration of the term science, where they're very blatantly saying, no, it's about you believe in what we say, and that's scientism.
What they're doing and what the system and what the satanic plan is to get everybody enrolled into scientism, which means, science will come up with an answer. And that science is big pharma. So there's a pandemic, and then we're going to have science figure it all out, and then we're going to all inject everybody, and it's all going to be better, right? That's the kind of mentality that they've been fostering in the public all our lives. And that will come up probably again as we continue our conversation is about the scientism. So they defaulted everybody away from their natural religions and put them right into some kind of a fake religion, which is really satanic, which is scientism, which gears people up for this kind of a scam and other scams, right? It's like, for example, scientism. Well, we could just take a guy and turn him into a girl. Not going to work out. It's not possible.
And David is right. It's not possible to turn a male into a female. Individuals having two X chromosomes, XX, are female, and individuals having one X and one Y chromosome, or XY, are male. These are scientific facts. Now, we're not debating the fact that some people may be confused about their gender, but taking hormones, mutilating body parts, or trying to add body parts does not change anyone's chromosomal composition.
But one thing we must consider is, why is there so much confusion? Could it be due to hidden ingredients in the vaccines, like aborted fetal tissue?
When we talk about gender dysphoria, a female aborted fetal cell or a male aborted, injected into the opposite sex, could that be problematic as well? Those things were not considered and are still not considered, even though they must be, they should be, if you're into sound scientific investigation and integrity. These questions must be asked, but these are the questions that are prohibited, which means they are the ones that most desperately need to be asked.
There have been things that have been written about the cells that are used in the vaccines, the cells from aborted fetal tissue, the MRC5 and the WI38, that are full sets of chromosomes that get injected into children at a very early age. One is made from a female fetus and the other is made from a male fetus. And there has been suggestions in some minor publications that perhaps it was the introduction of the opposite gender DNA into these young children at such an early age that they're still developing. I mean, just because a baby is born doesn't mean that they stop developing. I mean, for sure, the first year of their life, think of all the things that our children are doing. They're learning to hold up their head and roll over and eat and hold things and talk and walk and all the things that are happening developmentally. And we're injecting these things into children, large doses of these things, before they're even 2 years of age. So are the cells from aborted fetal tissue confusing the brain? Are these cells leading to some of the transgender confusion? I mean, we've never seen anything like this on such a massive scale in our entire lifetimes, maybe in the history of the world, that we've seen all of these children with now claiming gender confusion and are now being subjected to mutilations and child abuse at under the age of 12. It's one big travesty that's all mixed together under an evil umbrella of Satan running rampant on the face of this planet and doing whatever he can get away with to God's children and to our children, which are also God's children.
Dr. Tim Penny has a great point. Satan is trying desperately to destroy God's children, and the aborted fetal tissue that comprises many vaccines might be just one of the vectors that the devil is using.
Dr. Tenpenny mentioned WI38 and MRC5 aborted fetal tissue. The WI38 cell line was developed by Dr. Leonard Hayflick in 1962 by taking lung cells from an aborted female baby. The MRC5 cell line was developed in 1966 for the Medical Research Council in England. This cell line was cultured from lung tissue taken from an aborted baby that was male.
Shockingly, one very visible promoter of vaccines, many of which contain aborted fetal cells, is the Pope.
What did Pope Francis say? He said the world only needs two things. It needs to defund its militaries worldwide, and the world needs more vaccines.
We have really a religion that I believe has taken over the planet. In fact, it's what I've said is it's the religion that has accomplished consuming all others. You saw the Dalai Lama and the Pope and these other religious leaders, Deepak Chopra, for example, just, virtue signaling their vaccines and also saying, hey, the world has to believe in science because it's more important than, for example, using aborted fetus cells in these vaccines. Well, the Pope doesn't seem to care about that, right? Isn't that crazy that the vaccine manufacturing process is predicated on harvesting intentionally the living fetuses of women, aborting them for their vaccine seed stock, and that's such a violation.
It is truly a moral violation, but sadly, morals seem to be irrelevant when discussing vaccines. Case in point, here's Dr. Stanley Plotkin, the godfather of vaccines, discussing his involvement in the creation of vaccines using aborted babies, as well as his assertion that only religious zealots oppose using aborted fetal tissue in vaccines.
Have you ever worked on developing a vaccine that was eventually used by the public?
Yes.
Okay. Which ones?
Well, rubella, rotavirus, rabies, and I've made contributions here and there to anthrax, cytomegalovirus, varicella.
Your work related to vaccines, how many fetuses have been part of that work?
My own personal work, 2.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked Plaintiff's Exhibit 41. Okay. Are you familiar with this article, Dr. Plotkin?
Yes.
Okay. Are you listed as an author on this article?
Yes.
This study took place at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
You were at the Wistar Institute, correct?
Yes.
How many fetuses were used in the study described in this article?
Quite a few.
So, this study involved 74 fetuses, correct?
Well, I don't remember exactly how many.
Turn to page 12 of the study.
Yeah, 76.
76.
Mm-hmm.
And these fetuses were all 3 months or older when aborted, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And these were all normally developed fetuses, correct?
Yes.
What organs did you harvest from these fetuses?
Well, I didn't personally harvest any, but a whole range of tissues were harvested by co-workers.
Okay. And these pieces were then cut up into little pieces, right?
Yes.
And they were cultured?
Yes.
Okay. Some of the pieces of the fetuses were pituitary gland that were chopped up into pieces to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Included the lung of the fetuses?
Yes.
Okay. Included the skin?
Yes.
Kidney?
Yes.
Spleen?
Yes.
Heart?
Yes.
And tongue?
I don't recall, but yeah, probably yes.
So I just want to make sure I understand. In your entire career, and this was just one study, so I'm going to ask you again. In your entire career, how many fetuses have you worked with?
Well, I don't remember the exact number, but quite a few when we were studying them originally, before we decided to use them to make vaccines.
Do you have any sense? I mean, this one study had 76. How many other studies did you have that you used aborted fetuses for?
Oh, I don't remember how many.
You're aware? Are you aware that one of the objections to vaccination by the plaintiff in this case is the inclusion of aborted fetal tissue in the development of vaccines and the fact that it's actually part of the ingredients of vaccines?
Yeah, I'm aware of those objections. The Catholic Church has actually issued a document on that which says that individuals who need the vaccines should receive the vaccines regardless of the fact, and that I think it implies that I am the individual who will go to hell because of the use of aborted tissues, which I am glad to do.
Okay. Do you know if the mother is Catholic?
I have no idea.
Okay.
No.
Do you take issue with religious beliefs?
Yes.
Okay. You have said that, quote, vaccination is always under attack by religious zealots who believe that the will of God includes death and disease?
Yes.
You stand by that statement?
I absolutely do.
Okay. Are you an atheist?
Yes.
Some people exude evil, and Stanley Plotkin is one of them.
And one organization in the United States that is evil and criminal is the CDC, especially the ACIP committee, which is responsible for determining which vaccines are included on the CDC's childhood schedule.
watching the ACIP committee, there's a common thing you hear, and you even heard it during the COVID vaccine push, is we need to license it in order to see how safe it is. And again, that's kind of like, we need to pass the bill in order to see what's in it. That was the famous, I think, Nancy Pelosi line. It's a very similar mindset of, well, let's just get this thing out and then we'll do some science, but not before. And so keep that in mind when you're looking at these vaccine schedules.
If it's not going to provide protection to the whole body, only to the deltoid muscle you injected inside of, why are you giving it to them? It's not like you just get polio in your deltoid muscle. It's not like you get measles in just your shoulder. It's so ridiculous. This is just another spin or narrative to try to convince you that they're safe and effective when in fact they know they're lying to you.
The degree to which this is a coordinated effort is truly astonishing. So, for example, Georgia State School of Law had a meeting entitled Restoring Trust in the CDC and the FDA, and that was on March 23rd of this year of 2023. What's interesting about that is, first of all, what business does an educational institution have promoting a pharmaceutical product? And why are they sock puppets for government agencies who are sock puppets for the pharmaceutical industry? The coordinated indoctrination at every level is truly terrifying. It should be noted too that the government agencies, are remnants of quasi-military applications. That's why they have ranks like Surgeon General. It's why they wear uniforms. So the idea that a government military installation is in charge of private health or public health should tell us right away that something is wrong. The military-industrial complex model works just as well enslaving our own people as it does other countries, and we would do well to keep that in mind.
Did the CDC change the definition of a vaccine? So now it no longer has to prevent transmission. Again, it's easy to do. We just say, bye-bye CDC, you're a treasonous organization. You have no place in the United States of America. Gone.
Yes, the CDC did change the definition of vaccine during COVID in order to get the COVID injections under the vaccine umbrella and to protect the manufacturers from lawsuits.
And yes, they need to be gone, especially in light of what went down about 20 years ago. Are you familiar with the story of Dr. William Thompson, also known as the CDC whistleblower?
If the CDC is responsible for the schedule of vaccines for children, when they should be given, and that is safe and effective, if that's what they're determining, and you supposedly have to follow that schedule in order to participate in school and institutions and life in America and in society, if that's true, why? Why did William Thompson at the CDC, why did he blow the whistle by supplying documents from the CDC, internal documents he was told to shred? He sent those to Dr. Brian Hooker. When he gave them to Brian Hooker had been squeezing the CDC for information about proven safety studies that the CDC had on all vaccines for children, and he just got one dead end after another. There was no research they could even provide him. When William Thompson learned about him, he sent him the documents that he was told to shred. In those documents, the CDC conducted their own study to determine, is there really a connection between MMR vaccines and autism? If you haven't seen the documentary Vaxxed, V-A-X-X-E-D, you can hear the phone calls between Brian Hooker and William Thompson. You can see the documents he provided that were asked to be shredded by the CDC heads who conducted and compiled the research, and then they asked William Thompson to shred it, and he hid it, and then delivered it to Brian Hooker.
Dr. Thompson had a different story to tell now based on the MMR vaccine and how he and his colleagues back in 2003, 2004 had covered up the fact African-American boys that received the MMR vaccine on time were getting autism at 3 times the rate of those African-American boys where they merely delayed the MMR vaccine until after 3 years of age. And that they had covered up those results, that they had actually destroyed federal records on that, and also on the fact that there was a definitive relationship between what's called isolated autism, or what we know as regressive autism, and the MMR vaccine.
In 2000, I went to testify before the US Congress. I was still in the UK at that time. And thereafter, I met with members of the CDC, the Vaccine Safety Office, and those dealing with autism, Ian Lipkin from Columbia and others. We met at Cold Spring Harbor, and we had a discussion about the role of vaccines in neurodevelopmental disorders and what should be done. And they said, look, Dr. Wakefield, every child effectively gets the MMR, only a few get autism. Why? And I said, well, we believe, having studied patterns of exposure to infectious disease for many years, we believe that it is age of exposure, at least in part. One of the variables is the age of exposure. The younger you get the vaccine, the greater the risk. So the CDC went off back to Atlanta, and to their credit, they tested that hypothesis. They tested the hypothesis that the children that they should be looking at, who would be the ones where the problem was seen, are those children who develop normally by all sort of measures, all metrics, and then something happened to them and they regressed, they disappeared, they became autistic, effectively regressive autism. And so they called that isolated autism. It's a term that's never been used before or since, but that was the group. If there is an association between MMR exposure and this disorder, and age of exposure is the key factor, this is the group that we should see it in. The children who were perfectly normal to 12 months of age, something happened and they disappeared. That is exactly what they found. They tested an a priori hypothesis, and that is exactly what they found. They also found, which they did not expect, that black boys were at very high risk of autism following MMR. They didn't anticipate that. It wasn't an a priori hypothesis. It was something that came out, but it was a very strong association.
So black boys who received the vaccine on time had a 3.86 relative risk. That means a 386% greater chance of getting an autism diagnosis than black boys who did not.
So what did they do? Did they alter the schedule to give it later, to give the vaccine later to avoid that early risk? No. Did they conduct a bigger, better study nationwide to determine if they could reproduce those findings in a larger cohort? No, they did not. What did they do?
He and his 4 fellow scientists were called into a conference room at CDC headquarters, and they were asked to bring their race-related data, in other words, their data that was relevant to black boys. And they were asked to bring it into the conference room. The man who asked them to bring it in was Frank DiStefano, the chief of the Immunization Safety Office. And when they got in there, DiStefano had 4 large garbage cans. And he instructed the scientists to dump the data on race, the race-related data, into those 4 large garbage cans. And they destroyed it. And then they published that study without that data.
They wrote a paper which said something completely different. That MMR vaccines not associated with autism, there's no need to be concerned. For 14 years, American children were deliberately, willfully, and recklessly put in harm's way of a very serious, ostensibly incurable neurological disorder. Millions of children. And that is one of the gravest misdemeanors in the history of medicine and science, not least of which is because these people were sworn to protect the health and well-being of American children. They did completely the opposite. They committed one of the worst humanitarian crimes of all time.
What William Thompson actually said was they destroyed the data. What they found was a massive increase in autism, especially in African American boys, if the MMR was given prior to age 3. There were a whole lot of other significant findings of harm to everyone that were thrown away. They had a dumpster party, but William Thompson kept a copy of this literature on a drive in his own safe, and he produced that to Congress.
Bill Thompson, to his own credit, issued a statement through his lawyer that although he did not mean to go public with these revelations, what Hooker said in his characterizations and the tapes themselves were accurate. He has since asked to be subpoenaed to Congress because he feels that if he speaks openly about this, he will lose his job and his pension. But he has asked to be subpoenaed by Congress so that he can be allowed to talk about this issue. And to date, Congress has refused to subpoena him.
Dr. Thompson was repentant, he was conciliatory, and he wanted this information to get out. He actually filed a complaint against his coworkers with the Office of Research Integrity in the Department of Health and Human Services because they committed fraud. And fraud is a very, very strong word. But what Thompson was saying as a CDC insider was that we withheld information, we destroyed data, we found particular results, and we never shared those results with the public. And he wanted to make it public. And then, of course, because of Dr. Andy Wakefield's involvement in the MMR vaccine, I got him involved very, very quickly, with Dr. Thompson, and that led to the movie Vaxxed, which uncovered, this entire controversy. The movie Vaxxed took off like wildfire because it was banned from the Tribeca Film Festival, and then all of a sudden everybody's clamoring to see this movie that people don't want you to see. And so it became quite a phenomenon. It showed the dirty underbelly of the CDC, that they do lie, that they do hide, and sort of this paper trail that I've put together over the past 20 years on the CDC that showed that they lied regarding mercury in vaccines, they lied regarding the MMR vaccine, and they say with absolutely no basis whatsoever that vaccines do not cause autism, when it's one of the most understudied things that they've ever seen. They dismissed it based on fraudulent studies on thimerosal-containing vaccines, fraudulent studies on the MMR vaccine, and Thompson helped to expose all of this as a CDC insider.
The story of William Thompson, the CDC insider who blew the whistle on the CDC's fraud, was brilliantly documented in the film Vaxxed, which was directed and written by Dr. Andy Wakefield.
Here he is describing the art of medicine and how important it is for doctors to listen to parents, as well as his publication of parent stories who had children who had received the MMR and had gastrointestinal issues that nobody else was paying attention to.
The fundamental rule of clinical medicine is to listen to the patient or listen to the parents, because what they tell you will provide the clues as to the origins of their symptoms, of their disease, and that is the art of medicine. And it's a very important point to make. The people who talk about medicine as being a science, actually there is an art to medicine that is far more fundamental at the core of medicine than it being a science per se. So the parents would say to us, my child was perfectly well. He had speech, language, interaction with siblings. He then received an MMR vaccine in many cases and soon thereafter lost all his skills. They may have had a seizure that sort of preceded this, that suddenly after the vaccine there was a seizure, the child never recovered, was never the same again. And so the parents also said the reason they came to me as a gastroenterologist is that their child had intractable gastrointestinal symptoms that had been dismissed by the medical profession. They'd said, oh, that's just part of autism, your child's bound to have diarrhea 12 times a day, or in severe constipation or pain or abdominal bloating or failure to thrive. No. Those were clear indications of an underlying organic disease. And so our duty was to take the parent's story and to investigate it to the best of our ability, not to dismiss it because it went against the sort of pertaining belief system that vaccines were safe and effective. And so I initiated that investigation, and the parents were right. And the important thing to take away from this is that the parents were right. On almost every aspect of autism, that the experts had an opinion that it wasn't going up in incidence, that it was nothing to do with bowel disease or bowel disorders, that it was a behavioral disorder, that it was genetic, that it was the mother's fault, any number of things. The parents have always been proven correct. So what we published was what we had found, we published the parent story. This is what we were told, and here are our findings. And the conclusions of that were not that the vaccine causes the problem. We stated, as you point out, that this does not prove an association, let alone a causal association between the vaccine and the syndrome described. But further research is clearly necessary. That's what we said. Well, that was the beginning of the end of my medical career.
Questioning whether the vaccine was linked to gastrointestinal damage in children was not allowed, nor was stating that more research is needed. And Dr. Wakefield suffered greatly.
But if no more research is needed, then that's basically saying that the jury is in and that the science concerning vaccines is settled, right?
Science is never settled, period. We are constantly learning new things all the time, and to believe that science is settled is ludicrous. I've seen this used politically, and it's absolutely asinine and laughable. Any scientist who believes science is settled is, quite frankly, not a scientist.
Nevertheless, Dr. Wakefield has been heavily persecuted for the past 20 plus years. As we just heard, the vaccine in question was the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella.
According to the CDC's excipient list on cdc.gov, the MMR Pro-Quad contains MRC5 cells, which is aborted fetal tissue, MSG, a brain excitotoxin, recombinant human albumin, bovine calf serum, neomycin, an antibiotic, and a whole host of other toxic ingredients.
The MMR shot stands for measles, mumps, and rubella. And the rubella fraction of the MMR vaccine is made from cells of aborted fetal tissue. And we've known that since the 1960s. And we've also known since the 1960s that when you combine 3 different live viruses together into one shot, the measles, the mumps, and the rubella, it leads to a very toxic cytokine stimulation of inflammation in your system. And it leads to a more of a toxic type of effect than almost any of the other vaccines in the schedule. Now, there's never been mercury in the MMR vaccine because it's a live virus vaccine. There's never been mercury there. But it's the combinations of the different chemicals that cause the problem.
Most doctors in medical school are not educated about the toxic ingredients and combinations of chemicals in vaccines.
And many good doctors truly have no idea what's in the vaccines that they give to their patients.
I do not recall a single course on what was in a vaccine. I never was told that there were any side effects to vaccines. When I got to residency, which is after the 4 years of medical school, I chose to become a pediatrician. So I got 3 more years of pediatric training. That's when you learned what to give according to the CDC, but not what was in the vaccines, and never the fact that vaccines caused any problems. We truly were taught, just like doctors still believe today, that serious side effects from vaccines are 1 in a million. And they still preach that same ridiculous data point, which is so far from the truth, it's laughable. The problem, though, really is if your entire system has trained professionals saying they're absolutely safe, serious problems are 1 in a million, and they don't know. Doctors don't know that all these chronic problems that my data showed, for example, I mean, the fact that you can have more allergies and asthma and neurodevelopmental problems. There are other studies showing even more horrific data points, like way more cancer and heart disease, and you name it. If it's a chronic disease, especially autoimmune related or allergy related, vaccines have a huge part in it. But doctors don't know that. So we would never, as a standard trained physician, think about the chronic condition in front of us as being vaccine related. So if you don't know it's related, you're never going to report it as related, and it remains sort of a mystery to people of why we're seeing all these chronic health problems.
The time spent studying vaccines in medical school is at most half a day. I don't even remember during my time at medical school being taught about vaccines. And then it was just the schedule, the benefits or the supposed benefits. No discussion of risks at all. So we as medical students were not being given fully informed information about the vaccine. So how could we possibly pass that on to anyone? How could we give them informed consent about the risks and benefits when we were not taught about them ourselves?
Vaccines were not very much discussed in medical school, other than this is what vaccines do. They save lives, they protect people from disease, and this is the schedule you need to use in your pediatric clinics to give to kids. Started medical school in 1983, and it wasn't until 1998 that a mother came over to me and said, "Dr. Larry, did you know that there's mercury in vaccines?" And I said, "No." And instead of just pushing it aside and saying, it's just such a small amount, it doesn't matter, I actually started looking to see what else is in vaccines. And I realized that there's a great amount of material in vaccines that impairs many cell structures and cell functions.
Absolutely, doctors are not adequately educated on vaccines in medical school. Or in nutrition in medical school. They get a half day in medical school, and all they're taught is this is the vaccine, this is what it's used for, this is when you give it, the CDC schedule, believe it, it's a cult. You don't have to know how they're made. All of vaccine science is just criminal fraud. All of vaccine science, and it always has been. And this is what we've done in as an expert witness, if you will, in vaccine court. I'll just use the euphemism there, the kangaroo court called vaccine court.
And in medical school, you're sort of trained to learn from authority. So there's so much to learn. You're just trying to absorb it all, and it's rapid fire. And then by the time you get to residency, you're learning how to take care of the patient in front of you, and that's rapid fire. And so you've got the senior doctor teaching the junior doctor, and the senior doctor's looking to the attending who's all-knowing, and you just sort of monkey see, monkey do, and never question, because I don't know, we don't question authority. We trust that those in powerful positions. I used to think, surely the CDC must know more than I do. That's what I used to think. This is the Center for Disease Control. Sounds good. Or the NIH, National Institute of Health. And I knew a couple really smart doctors that went off to the NIH, and I'm thinking, wow, yeah, who am I to question? You don't have to dig very far to realize that those people are just sold out to a narrative, and they are not giving you the full story.
As a physician, I can tell you, oftentimes we're overwhelmed. We're trying to take care of sick people. We're interested very much in healing people and making them better. We do have to rely on the people who sell these products to get our information. It's like drinking out of a water hose. And so you can imagine that the rep who is there to educate you on the use of their product, they're probably not going to tell you things that discourage you from using their product. I don't think that's true whether you're selling ice cream, tires, or vaccines.
I think doctors have gotten beat up a lot over the past decade or so, and sometimes with good reason. I think a lot of my colleagues are stuck in an old system where they are now just churning patients, and it's all run by third parties, by insurance companies and hospital chains and by the FDA and by whoever else, Medicare. And they're stuck. They're not bad people because I think they mean well. Everyone that I can remember in medical school meant well and went into it because they wanted to help people. There's some docs that are just like everybody else are a little crooked, but most physicians are not. But they're stuck in an old system that isn't working or serving their patient well. So if you're looking for a physician at this point, I think, look for a physician that is more, and I hate to use the word progressive because of the political implications, but at the same time progressive in terms of open to learning new things and open to trying new things, and more of a functional medicine physician, more of someone who is looking at alternative methods to deal with disease and reverse it.
We agree with Dr. Sani and Dr. Omar. Most doctors are good people and are stuck in an old system, and many of them honestly don't know there are better options.
And that is why we created Remedy, because many medical professionals honestly don't know about these solutions. And the censorship industrial complex is doing everything in their power to keep you from learning about them. They want to keep us all oblivious and compliant, but You deserve the truth.
And the truth is that we outnumber them by way more than 1,000,000 to 1. And when you choose to own the Hero package of Remedy, we're going to give you 5 additional thumb drives or DVDs, your choice, absolutely free.
Yes, we're going to collectively tell the censorship industrial complex to pound sand. We're going to send you 5 extra sets of all 8 episodes to give to family and friends absolutely free. And those haters of freedom cannot stop you from giving away DVDs and thumb drives.
Just click the button below and take advantage of this special offer. Thanks in advance for your support. We couldn't do this without you.
So back to the measles discussion. The Merck manual from 1966 stated that, quote, measles is usually a benign infection with a low mortality rate. One attack apparently confers lifelong immunity.
Here's Dr. Omar Hamada with more on the MMR vaccine.
MMR tends to be one that we see causing problems a lot more often than some of the rest. And it's the one that a lot of people are questioning as to whether or not it's related to autism. There have been studies that have shown not, there have been studies that have shown yes. I always cringe a little bit at this point in my career when I hear friends and family that have 2-year-olds that are going in for the MMR vaccine. I hold my breath and I hope that nothing bad happens. But like we were talking about earlier, I mean, measles, mumps, rubella, these were diseases that, yeah, we're seeing outbreaks more frequently in certain areas of the country, but they're not diseases that we're seeing a lot of deaths from. They're more diseases that we see, diseases of childhood. So where's the risk increased? Is it with the disease or is it with the potential risk with the vaccinations? And at this point, I mean, it's still, some people would say the jury's in. I'm still sort of like, I think still the jury's out, but it's still risky.
You can look at the last decade plus here in the US. We have anywhere from 200 to 1,000 cases of measles a year still in the United States. There hasn't been a single death. If you have adequate nutrition, and like I said, adequate vitamin A status, it's not fun. I mean, I heard about some patients, we had measles go through the Portland area some years back, and after the fact, I heard one of my patients had it, and the mom showed me pictures. That little girl looks sick. I mean, it can make you pretty sick, but it's not, for most people, it's not a big deal.
Growing up, one of my favorite TV shows was The Brady Bunch. I remember an episode where all 6 kids got the measles. The parents weren't scared, and neither were the doctors. And the kids were excited to stay home from school, and they got to play board games.
Not exactly scary, deadly measles that's pushed on us by the CDC, is it?
Many people who hear what I'm about to say would be very angry at what I'm about to say. They would say that measles is a deadly disease. But it's not. And we create fear because we need to use that fear to get people to get vaccinated. But measles is not a deadly disease. In fact, more than 99% of the time, it's not a deadly disease. In places where there's poverty, malnutrition, poor sanitation, dirty water, starvation, any virus can be a deadly virus, because the conditions are what create the opportunity for the symptoms to develop.
Now, the fear of measles, mumps, and rubella is extraordinarily overblown in history because we don't take into context the terrain or the health of the individual that suffers from something called measles or mumps or rubella. And the fact of the matter is, these aren't deadly diseases except in those who are already weak and vulnerable and susceptible due to other issues like toxicological burdens and or nutrient, mineral, or vitamin deficiencies. And so rather than restoring the integrity of the health of the immune system, the idea is to inject these substances and somehow prevent their manifestation.
What I didn't know until I started digging deeper and working in vaccine court was that the way I would make a drug is I'd make them all together. I'd take all 3 antigens and grow them in their appropriate medium, grow them in whatever cell line or whatever thing supported their growth. And then you clean them up individually and combine them. Or you grow them all in the same cell line and clean up whatever the animal debris is. What they do, because different companies owned different components, and there's that patent thing, is they never cleaned them up. And there was paper published mid 2015-16. So we don't understand it. The toxic effect of MMR is synergistic, not additive. And I'm like, wait a minute, you mean you didn't clean up any of them and you took 3 different manufacturing processes? So you might have baculovirus, you might have MRC5, and you might have monkey kidney mRNA DNA in the same shot. You didn't clean up any of them? And that's the answer. Because Tony Fauci and the government, all of HHS, disobeyed the law that said everything on the schedule because of the National Vaccine Injury Act has to be tested every 2 years, alone and in combination, and they've done none of it.
The outbreaks that we see with mumps and measles, at least half of the cases are fully vaccinated, so it's obvious that those don't work.
The Cochrane collaboration looked at more than 60 studies of pre and post licensure of the MMR vaccine, and they said that it's largely inadequate to determine the safety profile of this vaccine. So that's for the most part, a pretty respected collaboration of scientists around the world.
The Cochrane collaboration said that the current studies on the MMR indicate that it is impossible to determine if it's safe or not. The funny thing is that there are hundreds of documented cases, maybe thousands of undocumented, of measles going unreported to the CDC every year. That's right. Thousands of kids show up every year in emergency rooms and clinics across the nation with spiking fevers, rashes, and seizures caused by measles virus.
The medical literature describes their illness as clinically indistinguishable from wild-type measles, but it is caused by a vaccine virus. In other words, the MMR causes measles outbreaks. Mumps too.
Do you remember the Harvard mumps outbreak of 2016, which was at a fully vaccinated college population, according to the Public Health Department in Cambridge? In recent years, we have also seen mumps outbreaks in 100% vaccinated populations, like the University of Richmond, Loyola University, and Fordham University. In 2010, Merck was sued for selling a vaccine that caused mumps and measles outbreaks. This has been borne out by the scientists themselves, the virologists who worked for Merck. They filed a False Claims Act with the federal government, stating that this was all fraud and that, quote, the company ordered us to spike these blood samples with antibodies from animals so it would pass the FDA scrutiny and be accepted as an effective mumps vaccine.
In addition to causing mumps and measles, there are hundreds of articles that document some of the other chronic adverse conditions from the MMR vaccine, including neurological disorders, serious blood disorders, sensory impairments including eye disorders and hearing loss, immune system damage, bowel disease, and severe allergic reaction.
And as we discussed earlier, the MMR vaccine has been linked to increased rates of autism, as have other vaccines.
The concern here is that multiple vaccines trigger a hyperimmune response, a febrile seizure that could precipitate a neuropsychiatric disorder, such as autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's, or clinical autism.
I've worked with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for the last 5 years, documenting the iatrogenic disaster that is autism.
Autism is now 1 in 35, according to the CDC. That's for 8-year-olds who were born basically in 2010, because this was a data set closed in 2018. Folks, this is, it's projected to reach every other boy in the next 20 years. I mean, the rise is just marching up without a glitch. And I predict that, if parents really do fall for this COVID jab in the childhood schedule, that's going to accelerate this even greater.
I think there's a lot of reasons why autism has skyrocketed. For one thing, children now get 25 shots by 2 years of age. And that includes over 52 antigens and many milligrams amount of foreign matter. including things like fetal bovine serum, which is cow blood, chicken parts, dog tissue cells, polysorbate 80, polysorbate 20, aluminum, mercury, all kinds of other chemicals that are in there that are injected in our healthy children, gifts from God that have incredibly important God-given immune systems. They are assaulted. It's a chemical assault on their body by the time they're 2 years of age.
Our ability to detox heavy metals develops with our seroconversion capacity. So it's not until we're in close to our teens that our bodies actually detox heavy metals very well. Why do you think lead paint is so much more dangerous to a little child than it is to an adult? Okay, an adult can be around lead paint and never have problems. You have children around lead paint and it causes brain damage. Why? Children's bodies haven't developed the capacity to detox heavy metals, especially a newborn.
We learned in an earlier episode that vaccine manufacturers cannot be sued if the person is damaged or even killed due to a vaccine. It's the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program Trust Fund that pays the money when parents sue, like the Hannah Poling case.
Hannah's father, John, is a Harvard-trained medical doctor. He's a neurologist, and in 2008, he claimed that Hannah's autistic symptoms were caused by a vaccine reaction that she had after she received 5 vaccines, the DTaP, Hib, MMR, varicella, and polio, at the age of 19 months. Here's what's interesting. Hannah had previously been part of a study of normally developing children before being diagnosed with autism, and she'd received advanced brain imaging technology that was being developed by Harvard University. Her father, John Poling, was able to present compelling evidence that the vaccine reaction was causative of Hannah's autism. And the vaccine court ruled in favor of the Poling family, stating that there was sufficient evidence to conclude that the vaccines given to Hannah Poling had likely aggravated an underlying mitochondrial disease, causing brain damage with features of autism. The Poling family was awarded just over $1.5 million.
But sadly, not every family with vaccine-damaged children receives the money they deserve. Most cases get caught up in the courts and the family receives no monetary assistance.
For me, this is very, very personal. I have a vaccine-injured son who's now 25 years old, and he received, a whopping dose of mercury in his infant vaccinations, which contributed to his regression into autism. And, so for them to, basically dismiss those particular concerns for me and millions of others individuals around the world. The latest estimate of autism incidence worldwide is 31 million, which is really a lowball estimate. That's a very, very low estimate for the number of children who have autism. And so this is a huge slice of the population. This isn't just individuals who are a little quirky or whatever. Most children who are diagnosed with autism will never be able to live independently throughout their lifetime. And, we're seeing it in epidemic proportions, even by CDC's admission that there's 1 in 36 individuals that were born in 2012 that now carry a diagnosis of autism. We started with biomedical interventions with my son when he was 2 years old. And we worked very, very hard to rid his body of the toxins that he received in his infant vaccines, things like mercury, things like aluminum, things like formaldehyde. And then we saw gains, we saw improvement, we saw, things are incremental. There are success stories of children who are brought completely out of autism and lose their diagnosis. My son was not one of those. But what we're also finding is that these children are absolutely brilliant. My son is what's called a speller. And he spells, because of issues with fine motor, with ocular and with motor and with oral motor. He's nonverbal, but he spells as a mode of communication. And the things that we see from him show his absolute brilliance. These children are locked in this world. And, my hat's off to the Spellers movement in general. There's a movie that's come out called Spellers the Movie that details details this, and it shows, children going to college, who are nonverbal, who are unreliably verbal, and are now speaking through the use of some type of communication device, unaided while they're communicating, and are going to high school, finishing high school, going to college, finishing college, and contributing to society. So this is really a game changer for those individuals with autism who are nonverbal. We did use DMSA. We also used DMPS, and we were able to chelate much of the mercury out of a system. We did regular analyses of what was the mercury level in his urine, in his hair, in his feces, and we tracked that. We also used oral glutathione. We pushed his system for detoxification with things like methylfolate and also methylcobalamin or methyl B12. And he's been on those supplements for a very, very long time. We've also worked very, very hard to heal his gut because he showed signs very early on, with a massive diarrhea followed by cycles of constipation, just going back and forth, that he had a problem with his gut. And so we've worked in earnest on his gut and to get him to the point where his gut is stabilized, that he has a stable bowel movement, that he has good quality bowel movement. And I think that makes an overall difference, because a lot of these children act out because they're medically uncomfortable. They're medically in severe pain. And so they're trying to act out because they're trying to communicate the severity of the pain that they show. And so, I thank God for these interventions. I thank God for the individuals, the practitioners, medical practitioners, chiropractic, naturopath, you name it. We saw incremental benefit from almost everything that we tried. And we focused on getting rid of the toxins, and we focused on healing the gut. And I think my son is much better for that.
We're so thankful that Dr. Hooker's son has made so much progress after being diagnosed with autism and severely vaccine damaged.
Here's another encouraging story of hope from Layla Sentner.
Same thing happened with my nephew, who was badly vaccine injured in California and diagnosed at age 3 with autism. And this is before I knew any of this. I didn't vaccinate my girls based on, asking God and getting the answer, unfortunately, by finding out someone else's baby was vaccine injured. I got seizures right after the MMR. That was kind of my big sign. But I started digging in when I learned that my nephew was diagnosed with autism, and now he's fully functioning and fine. I spent a lot of money. I didn't have my place, but I spent a lot of money in different places where he could go to detox, to pull out these metals, to pull out all of these things from his body, rebalance his gut, heal his gut. He's still on supplements. He's still on some binders. He still has work to do, but he went from not being able to speak to speaking completely fine, and he's a fully functional 7-year-old right now.
And the solution is detoxing as fast as you can, not putting more chemicals and more shots into your system every 6 months and everything like that, with more chemicals and more chemicals and more chemicals. So the solution is really detoxification, as opposed to intoxication or toxication.
The way this works is you go in and they do an IV infusion of something called EDTA. There's some other substance that can be used, but this is a very common one. EDTA is a chelator. In Latin, that means claw. So it grabs the heavy metal like a claw. And so if you have a lot of, say, lead or mercury in your bloodstream, then the chelator will grab that, make it very heavy because now it's weighed down by this weight or this claw called EDTA, and then it will come out in your urine.
We know the studies of autism, kids who have autism who were studied by Vargas. I think it was back in 2005. It was an autopsy study. And the brains of autistic kids had very high aluminum levels. Christopher Exley did a study 5 years ago that showed the same thing in a different way. Aluminum is toxic to the brain, and there are ways to get aluminum out of the body. For example, silica, and I know Fiji water. I don't have any affiliation with Fiji water, but it's one of the natural waters that's high in silica, and that can help usher aluminum out of the body.
We did a double-blind placebo-controlled study that was published in 2015 by Bob Navio in San Diego that showed that Suramin, the boys would start talking again and made eye contact again and took the flame down in their brain. And Bayer Monsanto, who owned the drug, took the drug away from everybody, and you can't get it. And it's a 100-year-old essential medicine again, but that's silly on us because we can make it. It's a 100-year-old drug. It's not on patent anymore.
Suramin is an anti-parasitic drug that has been used for, I don't remember the formal name of it, but it's a sleeping sickness. It's a insect-borne sleeping sickness that is very, very prevalent in Africa. And so Suramin has been used for years and years. And then a very, very small clinical trial was done and involved a researcher in University of California, San Diego, Dr. Robert Navio, and he showed significant improvement in terms of cognitive ability, in terms of self-regulation and communication, most specifically in boys. I don't want to discount that it wouldn't be helpful in girls as well, in individuals who were dosed with Suramin. These were individual children. It started out with a clinical trial of males only, and it did show that they significantly improved. It was, it was not necessarily Lorenzo's oil. It wasn't like, they came out of autism. It wasn't like the Ron Kaufman story or whatever, but it did show significant levels of improvement. And, I'm excited. I'm sort of on the edge of my seat to see what happens when they come up with more of a continuous dosing regimen. These children in this initial trial only received small amounts of Suramin. And because it is something that blocks nucleic acid formation, so you have to be very careful with it. But the clinical results were really, really compelling. And, I think that it could be, it's one of these things that we look at on the horizon that could indeed be a game changer.
Those are some great remedies for autism. Heavy metal chelators like DMPS, DMSA, and EDTA, as well as the anti-parasitic drug Suramin. But if you don't have the money for intravenous chelation, or if you just prefer an oral option, no worries. Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt from the University of Geneva in Switzerland has developed a special chelation protocol that involves consuming 5 grams of cilantro, or about 1 teaspoon, each day. He found that this protocol effectively removes mercury and other toxic metals from the brain and other body tissue in much the same way as intravenous chelation therapy, making it an excellent natural remedy to help detoxify heavy metals.
And there are some great natural remedies for measles too. Here's Dr. Irvin Sani.
There have been studies showing that populations that take adequate amounts of vitamin A have a much lower incidence of contracting the measles. Is this a substitute for the vaccination? I think that is something that every parent has to make, a decision they have to make on their own, with their own doctor, with their own family. I think that it's absolutely reasonable to make sure that your child's getting adequate nutrition, including vitamin A and antioxidants, up to the point of getting measles. If my child had measles, I certainly would not attempt to treat them only with vitamin A. As I mentioned earlier, you can get a severe form of encephalitis from measles, and you would want to get medical attention if it came to that. That being said, many children in the past, before this vaccine was available, contracted measles and developed immunity to it for the rest of their life.
There's about 90,000 deaths in lower income countries, and those are mostly related to malnutrition, specifically lack of vitamin A. And here in the United States, anybody that gets, the kids that gets hospital with it, over 75% of those kids have a low vitamin A deficiency, to the point where even the WHO, the World Health Organization, with all its faults, has to admit that no matter where you are in the world, what country you're in, United States or Kenya or Peru, wherever, if you have measles, they recommend vitamin A, high dose vitamin A, anywhere from 50,000 to 200,000 individual units for two consecutive days. That's WHO's official stance on measles.
Measles is a viral infection that is a rash that comes and goes in 7 to 10 days, causes itchy, runny eyes, and then when the fever breaks and it goes away, it causes a little peeling of the skin off the palms of your hands. It's mostly caused in children. The adverse effects are mostly caused in children who are low in vitamin A. So giving them vitamin A, in fact, it used to be that when they would do these national immunization days for a measles vaccine worldwide in third world countries, 2 weeks before they would give the measles vaccine, they would go through the community and they would give doses of vitamin A so that when they would get the shot, they would have no side effects and it would develop in their body even better. So vitamin A is a natural treatment for measles. So is vitamin C, turmeric, zinc, and quercetin are things that help with any type of viral infection. I mean, you can mitigate measles or prevent it, and just about any other type of viral infection by just having adequate vitamin C, vitamin A, having a vitamin D level between 80 and 100. I think it's worthwhile getting a blood test on that. Sometimes you can actually even do it as a finger stick. There are some companies that do it for your children as a finger stick. And it's just very, very important for you to have those nutrients on board.
Many years ago, we utilized the nosode for the measles, in fact, and you can actually convert into homeopathic form, the actual substances in total of a measles vaccine, for instance, converted into homeopathic form. And we had done that with a young lady in her 20s at the time that wanted to go back to nursing school to become a nurse, and they told her she had to have the MMR vaccine to do so. And she was given this homeoprophylaxis scenario a number of times over the course of weeks, and actually manifested a mild fever and a little bit of an expression of little red bumps on her body. Yet it wasn't severe, it wasn't intense, and then she was analyzed because the option she had was also to show a titer for the measles, evidence of immune infection, prior infection, even though she, to her knowledge, had never had measles. And she got a titer test and it tested positive, having never had measles before, just by the utilization of a form of homeoprophylaxis in advance. And she was allowed into nursing school without the MMR shot.
It's awesome information to put in your natural ways to treat measles notebook, right?
Did you know that natural exposure to measles can actually be protective and preventative later in life?
There have been studies published showing that getting natural measles is protective against certain cancers. And so if you're vaccinating, you're losing that protection.
There's been a lot written over the years, since the 60s, probably even today, coming forward when you've got bold researchers talking about that the measles virus, the measles infection, was really important to childhood development, because most of the time people contracted measles somewhere between 7 and 9 years of age. They had a high fever, which locked in their basement membranes of their kidneys and their brain, and it sort of locked in their long-term innate natural immunity. Well, we knocked that out by eliminating a measles infection. The other thing that we did by giving the MMR vaccine to girls is that when they grow up and they become of childbearing age, they cannot pass on natural immune antibodies from having an infection. And it's actually, I've actually got several studies in my file that show that the antibodies from an MMR are not protective, but the antibodies, the different classes of antibodies that come from an actual measles infection are.
Natural exposure to measles or chickenpox or other relatively mild infectious diseases can actually confer many benefits to the health of the child for their life. It makes their immune system more robust. It speeds the response, the buildup of antibodies to future exposure. And importantly, it makes their immune system more resilient against variations of measles or chickenpox or anything that resembles those pathogens. So the strongest immune system is an immune system that has been exposed naturally, organically, to pathogens circulating in the wild. Not an immune system that has been subjected to an artificial inflammation or response by a vaccine. It's also worth noting that a stronger immune system that is provoked from natural exposure to something like measles, this immune system can help the body fight cancer throughout the entire life of that person. So you can actually reduce cancer risk through natural exposure to measles. You can reduce lifetime risk of shingles or other types of infectious diseases through natural exposure to chickenpox, for example. So natural exposure has a very important role to play, but only by first, in my opinion, strengthening the child's immune system through good nutrition, sufficient levels of vitamin D and zinc, so that they are nutritionally prepared for that exposure and their body can respond to it very efficiently and very successfully. And this approach of good nutrition, immune support combined with natural exposure can prevent pandemics and save millions of lives every year across our planet.
Natural infection to measles, there's been shown a reduced risk of non-Hodgkin's and Hodgkin's lymphomas. There's been a reduce in cardiovascular disease for adults later on in life. And so that's a really interesting point to that, because measles is a self-limiting disease in the United States. It's an issue in developing countries, again, like we've talked about, because of the malnutrition, because of the lack of sanitation, things like that. So there is actually some benefits to naturally acquired measles, as well as if you're not malnourished.
Studies show that people who did not have measles as children and were vaccinated for measles, they have a 67% increased risk of developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they have a 333% risk of developing Hodgkin's lymphoma. And if a woman had measles and mumps as a child, her risk of ovarian cancer is cut in half. Right there, we're talking about simply by getting exposed to these infections naturally as children, we just saved tens of thousands of lives, if not hundreds of thousands of lives in America alone.
We recently saw a special about a woman with incurable cancer at the Mayo Clinic that is now in remission thanks to, doctors say, a highly concentrated dose of the measles virus. And exposure to measles also has healthy heart benefits too.
That's right. Studies indicate that if you have had measles as a child and mumps, your body was actually being primed to protect you from heart disease, and that at the very minimum, you would cut down heart disease by 10% if people had measles and mumps as children. Now, according to the CDC, about 700,000 people each year die from heart disease in the USA. So you just save 70,000 lives every year simply letting children get the measles and mumps naturally. Speaking of heart problems, the COVID-19 injection is causing all kinds of cardiac issues, primarily due to the mRNA and the spike protein.
Here's the problem with these injections that they're giving them, is that they're telling your cells to make the spike protein, which is the fundamental pathological entity in the virus. And now, so in other words, the virus is the delivery mechanism of the spike protein. Once the spike protein's in, then we're done. Okay, virus can fall aside. And now we have the spike protein. So it's the spike protein that does all the problems. So now these injections, you bypass all that. Let's just get it in.
But don't despair. We have the remedies. Here's the Health Ranger, Mike Adams.
There are quite a few natural supplements that are scientifically shown to denature the spike protein itself. For example, there's one study that talks about a combination of bromelain and acetylcysteine, which is, there's a form of that in NAC as a common nutritional supplement, that this actually causes an unfolding of the spike protein, which alters its morphology so that it can't latch on to the receptor sites of your body's organs. Natural substances like bromelain and acetylcysteine can, in essence, deactivate the spike protein. So why isn't the public being told about those things? That information is being withheld from the public by the censors, by the tech platforms, by the government, by the regulators. If they cared about saving lives, they would share the truth with people that there are natural substances that can save lives and can deactivate the spike protein. But you never hear about those, except from alternative media, the people who actually care about humanity.
Another way to block the effect of the spike protein, if we can't dissolve it, we could try to block its effect in tissue. So ivermectin does that. That's an approach. Bromelain, a derivative of pineapple, and acetylcysteine.
And my parents are naturopaths, and We grew up, anytime there was a respiratory illness, you got bromelain and acetylcysteine. That was just standard remedies. Okay, that was 30, 40 years ago. Okay, and I've been using these for colds and flus for my 30 years of practice. They work extremely well, extremely well. They're a fantastic thing. So the bromelain dissolves the spike proteins. The cysteine then takes and detoxifies it. As the cysteine converts into glutathione, the glutathione just neutralizes all those spike protein byproducts. I personally would be buying up NAC if I were you. The FDA is trying to take that off the market because it is so effective against these types of issues.
Now, aspirin is a drug that many people be surprised to see me recommending, but because pharma, who's so effective at discrediting, just like they discredited all of us with the COVID, they discredited aspirin. Why? Because it was a threat to their drugs that they were putting out, which is the NSAIDs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Aspirin is essentially free, and these other drugs cost a lot more. Aspirin has been shown to decrease COVID deaths by 50%. And it also lowers their blood pressure with aldosterone. So you don't need much. I like a pure powder. This 99% pure USP, and I take about essentially 1 aspirin a day.
One thing that I recommend that everybody do is take an aspirin a day, baby aspirin a day, that helps minimize clotting disorders and helps reverse some of that propensity that we see with the spike protein administration towards clotting disorders. Other things would be IV NAD. There's actually a study at Vanderbilt that we've been working with a little bit that shows that NAD infusions will help people with long COVID symptoms or post-COVID vaccination issues. But basically, NAD is a nicotinamide-based cofactor in the body that we use to make energy. So it's used in the Krebs cycle to donate electrons, for example, to make ADP, ATP. It's also something that we see in high levels in the young people, the young population, and it decreases as we age. So we're also using it for longevity. We're using it for anti-aging because it's sort of an energy cofactor that makes us, Superman, so to speak. I mean, we give it and it helps decrease inflammation. It helps preserve cellular regeneration. It helps reverse symptoms of debilitating symptoms from like long COVID. So it's like a super juice that we're using now to address many different issues.
Nicotinamide is a scientific term for niacinamide. They're the identical molecules. But this was a study published last year that showed in small doses, interestingly a dose that I was already taking, but I had taken it before I saw this study, at a dose of about 2 milligrams per kilogram, which is about 50 milligrams 3 times a day for most people, was able to cut down obesity in mice by 50%. 50%, because what did it do? It corrected the reductive stress in the mitochondria.
The factories in our cells are the mitochondria. And when mitochondria are damaged, it basically depletes our energy and it ages our cells prematurely. So NAD helps replenish the stores inside the mitochondria, and it just sort of helps them regenerate and multiply and become more effective and efficient, just like we were when we were younger.
This is a supplement that everyone watching this needs to be taking. There's just no question about it. It's dirt cheap. I mean, a year's supply is just a few dollars. That's it, a few dollars. I mean, it's crazy. So it basically, remember we talked about the dangers of cortisol. Well, this will actually give your body the fuel to inactivate it to cortisol. As I mentioned, it has a striking effect on obesity in rats, and it radically reduces cancer by reducing reductive stress. Helps slow aging and reverses liver disease.
Based on that information from Dr. Omar and Dr. Mercola, we've started taking NAD every day. It kind of reminds me of the saying by Hippocrates, "Let food be thy medicine, and let medicine be thy food." It's the truth.
That's why we created Remedy, because you deserve the truth. But the censorship industrial complex doesn't want you to know the truth. They want to keep us all dependent on Big Pharma's vaccines and drugs.
So let's collectively tell them to get lost. We know that you have friends and family that need this information. That's why when you choose to own the Hero package of Remedy, we're going to give you 5 additional sets, thumb drives or DVDs, totally up to you, absolutely free, so that you can give them their own copy of this entire docuseries.
Just click the button below to take advantage of this special offer. And thanks in advance for your support. We just couldn't do this without you.
In closing, please remember that God has given us what we need to be healthy, and that He's given us what we need to keep our immune system strong. And we believe that He's put us in the greatest country on earth for a reason.
I still think the United States of America is the greatest country on the planet. And boy, are we goofed up right now. And I think we need to fight for that to get it back to where this country was designed to be, rather than give up on it. Yeah, there's hard times ahead, I think, and we got to be prepared for it. I see the similar thing about the Catholic Church. Our Pope has come out and said it's a moral responsibility to take these shots. I think it would be impossible to be more wrong than him. And yet, I don't think you just quit the church and quit everything you believed in your whole life. You make efforts to try to improve it. When you look for healing solutions, I'm really in the holistic world, and I'm digging in with a lot of, I've seen magical things out of the chiropractic field, out of the naturopathic field, out of the homeopathic field, acupuncture field. I've literally seen miracles, and slowly but surely, nutritional field. I'm starting to see little inroads into that. Hey, this one helped this guy who was hurt by the vaccine, and he was in pain, and he was this, and this snapped him out of it. And so I don't have any solutions where I can say, look, go here, go to plan A, but I am seeing progress, and it will grow, because you're asking the body in these realms to answer what it needs, rather than asking a scientist that may or may not exist in a lab coat what drug would work for you. So there's solutions out there. I'd go check your chiropractors out, check into naturopaths once in a while, osteopaths. I mean, these people are true healing, caring doctors. And I think there's real hope in those fields.
There is real hope in these fields: chiropractic, homeopathy, acupuncture, and nutrition. These are all superior to Big Pharma's pills, potions, and vaccines.
We'll see you tomorrow for episode 5 as we dive into the sordid history of the DTaP vaccine, further examine the COVID-19 injections, and of course, provide you with more life-saving remedies. Here's a brief preview.
I was given the DTaP, and within hours, I started febrile seizures and had 104 fever, and was brought into the hospital. And interestingly, back then in the 70s, they said this can't possibly, it's a coincidence that she just had the vaccine.
There is almost a religious zeal that surrounds vaccination. And it's particularly strong in those people like pediatricians, public health doctors, who appear to know very, very little about vaccine. To be accused of anti-science or being just simply an anti-vaxxer so we can write you off. This is a pharmaceutical industry propaganda ploy. It's no less, no more than that.
Washington Post did an article about me this week that said I was a conspiracy theorist, but they are actually part of a conspiracy to suppress people like me.
Who isn't an anti-vaxxer if the definition is you're not going to be compliant with this insane agenda?
Vaccine hesitancy is a healthy state of mind. We all should be anti-vaxxers at this point in time. We should all have extreme vaccine hesitancy.
Now, as it's become obvious how destructive of the immune system those shots are and were, many physicians and researchers are now not only questioning the idea of mRNA injection technology, but also all previous vaccinations.
Tetanus is caused by a bacteria called Clostridia tetani. That is the bug that can give you lockjaw, can give you tetanus and all these symptoms, okay? Rust has nothing to do with it. Rusty nails do not cause tetanus.
Tetanus is not a communicable disease. 10 years a booster, they just made it up. There's no data behind any of it.
Diphtheria and pertussis are easily treated with azithromycin, a Z-Pak. So they've really, the vaccines have outlived their compelling case.
We haven't had a case of diphtheria in this country or world, again, since sanitation, since we cleaned up things, in decades. So all we're doing with that shot is crippling the immune system's ability to respond to the other antigens in the DTaP shot.
Not only is it, the DTaP vaccine toxic, but it also is very, very ineffective in preventing pertussis. And we have pertussis outbreaks in fully vaccinated populations all the time.
So the tetanus vaccine that was rolled out in Kenya was laced with HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. And what that did was tricked those poor young ladies who got that shot in Kenya. Their immune system would attack their own HCG and make you sterile.
And that vaccine, it was approved by the United Nations. The UN is involved in depopulation of black people on our planet through the use of vaccines.
Vaccine manufacturers do not have to prove to our government or health agencies that their vaccine prevents the disease that they're targeting. They only have to prove to the CDC and the FDA, they have to prove that an immune reaction occurs at the site of injection.
They are known to cause autism. They are known to increase the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's.
The real worry was that a mercury bomb would be deployed somewhere in the United States, and that would cause a high level of, toxic event. Well, where would someone get that amount of mercury that would be feasible for a mercury bomb? And the answer was, it's in pharmaceutical products and childhood vaccines.
Add together the trace amounts through multiple vaccines administered sometimes all at once, you can end up with a very harmful level of mercury in the body of a child that is unable to eliminate that mercury quickly.
Kids do great. There's no reason to fear. They never needed to be isolated. They certainly never needed to be masked, and they definitely don't need a COVID jab. But what happened this last year? The CDC and their Immunization Advisory Committee voted unanimously to put the COVID jab on the childhood schedule. At that point, I had maybe 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 patients. Not a single child was hospitalized for COVID. In fact, I didn't even know of any children who went to the ER. They did just fine.
The COVID vaccine was added to the childhood immunization schedule not based on any scientifically valid reasoning of efficacy. It was added to that schedule in order to achieve legal immunity for the vaccine manufacturers.
Well, here's the problem. We don't know. We don't know what's in a single shot. And we haven't known what's in a single shot since 1986, because not one of them's been tested.
You have to start questioning what are in these things. Have they put other things in there that we don't know about? Can anybody prove that they haven't? I mean, we're not even still sure what's in the COVID shots. We don't even have a package insert yet.
And what we found is the supercharged C60 is we haven't found anything stronger that can deactivate the nanotechnology.
So charcoal is the leader in animal study research in longevity, which is such a shocker. I mean, we were never told. This is 80 years of research at least. What we do is we just start people on one 400 milligram capsule of activated charcoal a day.
The extract from cruciferous vegetables, I3C, okay. Also another good remedy is burdock root, or even the Essiac tea formula.
There's a lot of studies showing chlorophyll, and chlorella, which is this green algae, this single-celled green algae, has a lot of effects. The idea is these dioxins, they bioaccumulate. They bioaccumulate in the soil, they bioaccumulate in the animals, and in us.
We recommend NAC, N-acetylcysteine, about 1,500 milligrams a day, and milk thistle, also known as silymarin.
And it's now more important than ever to prepare yourself to be healthy, to exercise, to have good nutrition, to get good sleep. It is best for your immune system to be completely intact, for you to be prepared for that virus, regardless of whether there's an effective and safe vaccine or not.